Here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. The holiday season is upon us, and hopefully all of you guys are having a wonderful Christmas and wonderful Christmas Eve, and getting ready for what will no doubt be a great new year. And what better way to celebrate the holidays than with some Warhammer ridiculousness? And so the composition we're going to be running here today is, well, something a little silly. We are going to be going all in on the wonderful, the overpowered, and the vaunted Depth Guard Rush. So going over the composition here. The idea is to beat down the Tomb Kings with a bit of an unconventional strat. Rather than going for any gun line or artillery play, especially on a fairly lumpy map like Dragon Isles here, we're actually going to rush in and try to win this battle in close quarters combat. So going over the build here for my Lord, Count Noctilus coming in on foot. Nothing fancy to be said for him. On foot, he's pretty resistant to things like Bone Giants or Shopti Great Bows. Very hard to snipe. And of course, he's got insane combat stats. So over time, he will chew through just about anything. And with the recent Foot Lord knockback, or with what I really should say, the knockdown changes, he's pretty resilient even against large targets. So if you see Cetra on a chariot, if you see Cetra on the Kitty, or maybe Katep or Arkan on a chariot, then good old Noctilus can take him down. He also does bring some great utility to the field. He can heal himself, of course, with the Hunger. He's also going to heal you map wide with every cast. Got the Raise Dead summon to get Zombie Pirate deckhands on the field, as well as Invocation on the Heck to heal his troops. Very important for healing any of my elite infantry here. We've got Melkoth's Miasma to slow enemies, snare them, help bring down chariots potentially if my opponent had brought them. We also do have Arcane Conduit for the Wind's Magic, Wraith Storm to snipe down single targets or blob up enemy troops, and Roth's Moondial to get even more zombies. Alongside him, our sole hero coming in here is going to be the Morngull Haunter. Now this guy is, well, pretty strong. One of the main reasons I brought him here, though, is actually for the Chilling Aura. Because, once again, going so heavy on a very melee-centric build, and on Depth Guard in particular, means that units like Chariots, even with the knockdown changes, would be a devastating threat. They could very much just run amok among my infantry, and without too much mass, I'd have a hard time snaring them. So with 36% slow, I'm hoping that Depth Guard can stay on top of them and dice them to bits. For the rest of the composition, well, we've got no zombies. I'm going to be relying on Noctilus to do the summoning, because zombies are too slow. And being 13 speed slower than Depth Guard means they wouldn't be able to keep up. And if my opponent brought artillery, as he did here, then they would just get shot to crap. So I can't afford to have my Depth Guard slowed down. So we're actually going all in with a very wide, very mobile infantry build. So 2 units of Depth Guard make up the core of the army here. These guys, of course, will mince through skeletons rather quickly. They should trade well with just about anything, except maybe like the Kepler Guard. And although certainly not ideal against units such as Ushapti or big monsters, they should be able to do some hurt to them regardless with that high weapon strength. Behind them, we do have 2 animated Hulks. These guys are pretty cheap, relatively mobile, and they do hit pretty hard. So with a little bit of support, they should be able to provide this blocking power to stop enemy constructs and chariots from rolling through, plus provide some mass to plow through enemy formations. And behind that, furthermore, 2 Depth Guard with polearms. These guys, of course, pretty nasty against large if they can stay on it. Obviously one of the worst halberd units in the game, but you know, you got to go all in. We're going all in on Depth Guard, and if I want some anti-large and I'm going Depth Guard themed, might as well bring polearms. So these guys did get a buff to charge bonus with the last patch. They're still fairly flimsy, but hoping to get some value there. And hoping that if they get bogged down with some skeleton chaff, which my opponent has brought in here, some skeleton spears, these guys should hopefully dice through them pretty quick. On the flanks, 2 units of Syrenes, 1 on each flank. These guys pretty hard to shut down for the Tomb Kings who don't have too much magic damage outside of some missiles and, of course, Cetra on his chariot. Fellbats up in the skies just to disrupt because I had a few points left over. And for my opponent's build, it is a very artillery-centric composition, mix of skeleton archers and the Blessed Legion of Demonetization here in the back. These guys, of course, quite the nuisance, especially now that trees no longer block projectiles if you're in them. They could melt a unit like Depth Guard, much less animated Hulks, in seconds, so it's definitely a potent threat there. They're protected by Nakarn Warriors, a sight you don't see very often, but good against zombies, of course, as well as some skeleton spears, the Kepler Guard, and then, interestingly enough, some Tomb Guard with halberds out on the flank. So perhaps anticipating some crab play. My opponent did bring the more elite troops there. And not sure I'd bother with them, really. I think you might be better off just bringing a normal Tomb Guard and then bring more AP missiles. But perhaps the money didn't add up. Regardless, 2 Bone Giants are also in there providing fire support, as is Grand Hierophant Ketep, and Ketep is coming in on his DJ box. He's got his Bound Sandstorm to wipe out blobs of infantry, though there isn't much to target with it. Arcane Conduit, Transmutation Righteous Smiting to buff up his missile troops so he can buff up the Bone Giants or himself, or even the archers if you really wanted to. We also do have the Javs Incantation of Cursed Blades and the Nerus Incantation of Protection, both very powerful single entity buffs and protective spells, which synergize nicely with Restless Dead to heal all his troops. Surprisingly, no Lich Staff, so he can't debuff my cooldowns, but he does have a good amount of Winds of Magic between Covenant of Power and Arcane Conduit. So potentially going to be sniping me down. You can see the depth guard here already hammered down to 38 models, 7 models down, as they do charge up the hill here, looking to engage on the enemy troops. And the Tomb Guard Halberds, while certainly not too tanky against this, they will hold for a while. As you can see, they're on the charge. They're actually losing entire models to the depth guard, who just don't mess around. But with the artillery fire raining down, depth guard not having the best time of it, definitely getting mucked up a little bit. And obviously, Depth Guard does not have the best of stats. As they lose, they actually lost Frenzy there almost immediately. So there, as you can see, their combat stats are much lower than they could be. And that means the Tomb Guard will hold rather well. Mournvale Hunter then does dive into support, and you can see over here Depth Guard with Polearms doing quite the number on the Tomb Guard with Halberds. And once again, artillery just raining in, making it very hard to maintain Frenzy. And as you lose Frenzy, weapon strength goes down, and potency goes down as well. Here in the center, though, the Death Ball with Count Noctilus, as well as the Depth Guard and Animated Hulks, is taking no prisoners, piling through the Nacron Warriors and Skeleton Spears with contemptuous ease. Over here, Depth Guard Polearms, not really in their element fighting the Kepler Guard, but I really do not want Sirens fighting Kepler Guard, so we're just going to block them down with an armored infantry. Well, the Sirens do commit to this squishy blob, and while it's going to take them forever to chew through skeletons, I do believe they should win this out in the long run with all their debuffs and decent-ish damage output. Though certainly the AP's kind of wasted there. In the meantime, we do hear a Wraith Storm hammering down on Ketep, who's getting whittled down a little bit. Sirens actually flanked and got in on the Bone Giant, but not able to do all that much. Zombie Summon going in, and Noctilus dives through, going for the fight of his life here against the Bone Giant. And looking to chop that monster down to size, and actually whiffing there, which is kind of disappointing for only 30 melee defense. Noctilus would do better, but letting me down here. But he does get a nice sweep there. And of course, Bone Giants with their 9,000 HP. Something like Sirens will take forever to chip the Bone Giant down. You can see Sandstorm there, tearing through those ladies, doing a lot of damage, and just life in general, not ideal. Though at least we are kind of compromising the artillery. My opponent's archers also getting compromised by bats back here. They're already racking up some damage. Less Legion over here disrupted, and these archers here pressured back by the constant summons. And the Depth Guard obviously a bit out of their element here against the Kepler Guard, but are slowly but surely chewing through them and wasting their time, allowing the rest of my troops to just keep pushing through. There was in fact a unit of Shopti on the field, which I forgot to mention, helping anchor things. But as we're able to push through the flank here, we're now going to be able to collapse on the Tomb Guard with Halberds. Animated Hulks, still a potent force, especially against something like Shopti. Animated Hulks will do rather well because they do hit very hard, and Shopti do not have the best combat stats. And as the Tomb Guard here do get ripped to shreds, despite the summon support coming in, we are going to be able to start putting my opponent on a bit of a timer. Bone Giant disrupted here, Ketep running for dear life as the Animated Hulks close in and try to pressure him down. You can see zombie summons there disrupting. And we're basically just trying to string my opponent out and prevent him from utilizing the his full force. Now, certainly archery fire is coming in. You can see the curse coming down from Ketep, melting the poor Sirens, but Noctilus is having none of it. He is definitely the stronger fighter here, and might even be the stronger spellcaster, to be quite honest. But hell, he teleported a castle into the middle of the ocean, so you got to be at least a decent caster. And you can see Wraith Storm pouring down here, probably going to murder some of these Banshees, I would assume, or these Sirens. But hammers Noctilus into the dirt, and he is shattered on the ground there. And that is going to give us a big edge. It means my opponent's going to have no more magic support. It means we can start chopping these Giants down to size. Also means crumbling is going to start kicking in for a lot of these weaker troops. And things are definitely looking up for us. Depth Guard with Polearms there, taking some hefty losses. The Depth Guard over here down to 12 models. But slowly but surely winning those fights. The Tomb Guard getting dragged into the muck and overwhelmed. And one of the big problems is that since Depth Guard cannot really route these troops, you can't route units like Tomb Guard, since they're not living, obviously. It actually makes it more difficult to get this sort of shock strategy rolling. We weren't able to really breach a line unless we actually killed everything in our path, and it means versus another faction you could perhaps shock through. Depth Guard just can't, and they're now taking quite some atrocious damage. Animated Hulks here falling apart against the Kepler Guard and the Shopti, but Mournvale Hunter is in the pits here, slowing everything down, making it impossible for them to maneuver. allowing the rest of the animated hulks to get in. The depth guard over here on very good HP, up to 120 kills or thereabouts, and chewing through these weakling skeletons. They're definitely no match. Even the Kepler guard cannot stand. I don't think 1v1 they'd be able to take on depth guard. So they just get torn to shreds there. Regen being no saving grace. Noctilus in the meantime compromising this Bone Giant, and before my Sirens can get in on the back line, my opponent does concede the game there, granting a Pyrrhic victory to the Vampire Coast. So obviously a bit of a goofy and ridiculous build from the Coast. This is not something you would normally run, I don't think, if you're looking for a competitive build. But I really wanted to give a shake to the new depth guard, or the I shouldn't say new depth guard because they've got a minuscule buff, and see if they become a bit better. Probably not the ideal matchup because you just don't have you can't really shock your way through skeletons the way you can through, say, Empire State Troops or Bretonnian peasants or anything. But honestly, I hate to say it, kind of disappointed. With their low model count, the depth guard really do struggle to mince through infantry quickly. 125 kills was the max we achieved on any of these, and it's not like they were fighting such elite troops, and they're essentially berserkers. You expect them to just do damage to lower. They're supposed to beat down lower end troops. That's supposed to be their gimmick, especially the lower end unarmored troops, and they kind of failed at that here. Now, obviously, the Kepler guard was going to throw a wrench in things, and they traded the depth guard with halberds, traded pretty evenly with the Kepler guard, all things considered. So I can't complain there, but fighting the less elite infantry like Necron warriors. Now, obviously, the kill count for the enemy wasn't super high, but our kill counts were that high either. 125 kills, 56, 64. You'd think that blitzing through like that, we'd rack up much more kills, and it just didn't happen. Sirens ended up doing similar amounts of work. Obviously, one unit wasted its entire game fighting a Bone Giant, so you can't expect much there. But that game really ended up boiling down to the Morngul Haunter, or felt that way. Noctilus, obviously, carrying hard here with close to 2,900 HP damage. But looking at the damage numbers, none of these depth guard really performed up to what you'd expect or hope, especially against such squishy opposition. So most of these units didn't pay for themselves. Noctilus just delivered. Obviously, my opponent still did have a near full HP Bone Giant at the end game, so keep in mind the amount of value being distributed amongst the damage here is not quite as high as it could have been. If you factor in all the remaining HP on some of these units or remaining models on some of these units, you'd probably be looking at another, I don't know, 2,000 to 3,000 gold value that was not distributed. So do keep that in mind with these numbers. But if we're honest with ourselves, most of these units would not have generated anywhere close to their value. Maybe some of these animated hulks would have. The Banshees kind of performed here, fighting that Bone Giant, of course. But and maybe these depth guard would have eventually ground out enough value, but it just didn't happen quickly. Noctilus was the main damage dealer here. It was kind of disappointing there. For my opponent here, Scumbag was a very pleasant player. We talked a little bit after the game. The Bone Giant's probably not an ideal choice on this map, even if you had a more clear open. Even if you had, say, a better lineup of enemies to shoot, maybe more monsters and stuff like that. I don't think the map just wasn't ideal for Bone Giants, and we talked about it a little bit at the end of the game here. But yeah, Bone Giants just didn't pay for themselves. I think they were a big mistake on this map. I do also think this build kind of suffers from over-specialization. I think there's too much stopping power here against enemy artillery and big monsters, and you don't have too many things to counteract enemy infantry. Almost the only thing to really counteract enemy infantry in this build efficiently is Katep, and I think that is a bit of a weakness. If your opponent goes for a fairly artillery-heavy build themselves, or if they go for a, say, zombie-heavy build, I think this build would kind of struggle, because all you got is Necron Warriors and Kepler Guard, really, and then Katep. When I really think that, honestly, the two Bone Giants, the handful of Skeleton Archers, is probably adequate to stop enemy monsters. You could probably whittle them down. You could probably downgrade these Tomb Guard halberds to normal Tomb Guard, and simultaneously use those remaining points to upgrade these normal Necron Warriors, maybe to Tomb Guard. Maybe upgrade these to Shopti to a Tomb Scorpion, just because it's a somewhat more efficient multi-role unit. Shopti are really only against infantry, and I think they kind of struggle to help here against the animated hulks, or efficiently counter heavier infantry like Depth Guard. So I do think the build here over specialized a little bit against. I think there were too many units here to counter large, and there just wasn't really enough to stop a bunch of infantry rolling through. And I think the 2 giants would honestly be enough against like a crab rush or something. You'd probably adequately protected in that situation. So that could just be my 2 cents there. I just don't think... I think especially the 2 Tomb Guard with halberds were just kind of unnecessary. I think you could have gotten a better value there with something else. Maybe even Ushabti Great Bows could have been a little more versatile against different targets like Depth Guard or monsters or units like that. Where the halberds... I guess the one of them did generate quite a bit of value here, 1,000 value. But I don't think they really were worthwhile compared to normal Tomb Guard and using those resources elsewhere. Regardless, though, well played to my opponent here. Hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. As usual, leave your thoughts, opinions, comments, and critiques down below. I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do hope you all have a very Merry Christmas and a wonderful holiday. Be sure to leave your thoughts, opinions, comments, and critiques down below, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.